It's 2 a.m. You're not sad. You're not in crisis. Nothing is actually wrong. And yet your brain will not stop. It's running the same conversation you had 3 days ago, except this time you're saying all the things you should have said. It's rehearsing tomorrow's meeting for the 14th time. It's finding the one thing you did wrong in a day that went well, and it's pulling that thread until everything unravels. You tell yourself to stop, and the thought you have is, stop thinking about stopping thinking, which is somehow more thinking. You're not anxious about anything specific, you're just running. The engine is on and you can't find the off switch. And the worst part isn't the exhaustion. The worst part is that some of it feels productive. Like if you just think about it enough, you'll finally solve it, like the next loop will. Be the one that brings the answer. It won't. And somewhere, you already know that, but you can't stop. Anyway, that gap between knowing and stopping is what this video is about. Let's start with what overthinking actually is, because most people treat it like a habit or a personality trait or just the way their brain works. None of that is quite right. Overthinking is your brain doing something very specific, attempting to think its way to safety. The loop isn't random. Every cycle of rumination is your nervous system trying to solve a problem it has decided is not yet resolved. And the reason it keeps looping is not because you're weak or neurotic. It's because the brain has a fundamental asymmetry in how it processes threat versus reward. Neuroscientist Rick Hansen has documented this asymmetry extensively. The brain is like Velcro for negative experiences and Teflon for positive ones. A threat, real or imagined, activates the amygdala and demands resolution. A positive experience, by contrast, requires conscious effort to absorb and retain. This means your brain is structurally biased toward finding, holding, and returning to problems. Not because something is wrong with you, because something went very right in evolution and very wrong for modern life. The overthinking brain isn't broken, it's a survival machine running. In an environment where most of the threats are social, invisible, and unsolvable by thinking alone, here's what that looks like in real life. And I want to be specific, because overthinking doesn't look the same for everyone. The first pattern is the rewind loop. Something happens, a conversation, a decision, a moment where you said or did something, and your brain returns to it. Not once, not twice, dozens of times. Across days, sometimes weeks, each time slightly different. Each time with a new angle, a new version of what you should have done. The brain presents this as problem solving. It is not problem solving. The event is over. The variables cannot be changed. The loop is not generating new information. It is consuming cognitive resources, while producing the feeling of productivity without any of the results. The second pattern is the future simulation spiral. You have something coming, a conversation you need to have, a decision you need to make, an event you're not sure about, and your brain begins to simulate it. This is also presented as preparation, and some simulation is genuinely useful. Researchers at UC Santa Barbara found that mental simulation activates the same neural pathways as actual experience, which is why athletes use visualization effectively. But the overthinker doesn't simulate once and move on. They simulate every possible version, including the catastrophic ones. They then simulate their response to the catastrophic versions. They simulate the responses to their responses. The spiral deepens. The original event, which may never happen, has generated hours of mental labor, directed at a future that exists only in the simulation. The third pattern is the most subtle and the most exhausting. It's what psychologist Susan Nolan-Hoxima, who spent her career studying rumination, called response styles, the tendency to respond to distress not by acting but by thinking about the distress, by analyzing it, by asking why. Why do I feel this way? What does it mean that I feel this way? What does it say about me that I feel this way? This kind of meta-thinking feels like it has the texture of insight. But Nolan-Hoxima's research consistently showed that ruminative response styles, thinking about your feelings rather than processing them, significantly increase the duration and intensity of negative mood. You are not working through the emotion. You are keeping it alive by thinking about it. Now, here's what all three patterns have in common, and this is the thing almost no one says clearly. Overthinking is not a thinking problem, it is a safety problem. The brain loops because it has not received the signal that the threat is resolved, and it cannot receive that signal through more thinking, because the signal it needs is not cognitive, it's somatic, it's relational. It's the kind of resolution that comes from action, from completion, from connection, from the body, not from one more pass through the problem. This is why the standard advice, just stop thinking about it. Think positive. Distract yourself doesn't work. You cannot think your way out of a pattern that thinking created. The exit from the loop is not through the loop. Think of it like a browser with too many tabs open. You know the feeling the machine slows down? Everything becomes sluggish. The simplest task takes longer than it should, and you keep opening new tabs because each one seems important. Each one has something you might need, and closing one feels like losing something. The mind, that internal engine that never fully turns off, operates the same way. Each unresolved concern is a tab. Each what if is a tab. Each replayed conversation, each imagined future, each unanswered question is a tab. And the mind doesn't close tabs easily, because to the mind, an open tab is an active safeguard. Closing it means accepting uncertainty. And uncertainty to a nervous system trained to find and resolve threats feels indistinguishable from danger, so the mind keeps the tabs open. All of them, it runs them in the background, even when you're doing something else, even when you're trying to sleep, especially when you're trying to sleep, because sleep is when the external inputs stop and the internal ones get louder. And here is what Lumi knows that the mind does not. Most of those tabs will never need to be resolved. Most of the conversations your brain is rehearsing will not happen. Most of the catastrophes it is simulating will not occur. Most of the things it is reanalyzing were completed and survivable the first time they happened. The tabs are open for threats that have passed, futures that won't arrive, and problems that cannot be solved by thinking. The question is not how to think better about these things, the question is how to close the tabs. And this is where something shifts. The insight that actually changes the relationship with overthinking is not about controlling the thoughts. It is about understanding what the thoughts are doing there in the first place. Every thought loop is a bid for safety. Every ruminative spiral is your system, saying, I don't feel settled yet. I don't feel like this is resolved. I need more information before I can rest. The loop is not your enemy. It is a signal. And like every signal, the question isn't how to silence it, it's what it's trying to tell you. Research from Yale's Anxiety and Mood Disorders program has consistently shown that cognitive defusion, the ability to observe thoughts without being consumed by them, is significantly more effective at reducing rumination than thought suppression. In other words, trying to stop the thoughts makes them worse. Watching them without attaching to them makes them quieter. This is what Lumi offers in the loop, not silence, not the absence of thought, but a different relationship to the thought. The thought arrives, and instead of following it down the spiral, you see it, you name it. You recognize it as a bid for safety rather than a command to analyze. And in that recognition, the loop loses some of its grip. There is a specific practice that neuroscientist Judson Brewer, who has studied the habit loops of the overthinking brain extensively, calls getting curious about the loop itself. Not what the loop is about, but what the loop feels like, where it lives in the body, what sensation accompanies the thought. This shift from content to sensation, from what am I thinking to what does this thinking feel, like right now, interrupts the cognitive loop by moving out of the cognitive register entirely. You cannot think your way out of overthinking, but you can feel your way to the edge of it. So, what do you actually do? 3 things, grounded in research, that interrupt the loop without requiring you to win an argument with your own brain. The first is to close the tab deliberately. When you notice a loop starting, the rewind, the simulation, the meta-analysis, write it down. Not to solve it, not to analyze it, just to externalize it. The act of writing a thought down signals to the brain that the information has been captured and does not need to be held in active memory. A study from the University of Chicago by Locke found that expressive writing before a stressful event, even just a few minutes, significantly reduced intrusive thoughts during the event itself. The tab doesn't close permanently, but writing it down is the closest thing to saving the file and shutting it temporarily. You are telling your nervous system, I have this, I won't lose it. You can rest. The second is to give the loop a closing ritual. The brain loops, partly because it has no clear signal that the thinking session is over. Open-ended rumination has no finish line. It just continues until something external interrupts it. A closing ritual creates an artificial but effective finish line. It can be as simple as saying, out loud, or writing, I've thought about this enough for now. I'm choosing to set it down. Research on what psychologists call completion signals shows that deliberate, ritualized endings reduce intrusive thoughts significantly more than simple distraction. The brain needs to be told the session is over. It won't conclude that on its own. The third, and this is the one that requires the most honesty, is to ask what the loop is actually protecting you from. Because underneath almost every chronic overthinking pattern is something the brain is not ready to feel. The rewind loop protects you from accepting that you can't change the past. The simulation spiral protects you from tolerating uncertainty. The meta-analysis protects you from feeling the emotion directly. The loop is a very effective way of staying close to a problem without ever having to land in it. And the resolution, the real one, is not in the next pass of the loop. It's in the moment you stop circling and let yourself actually arrive at what's there. That moment is uncomfortable. It is significantly shorter than the loop, and it is the only way through. You are not someone who thinks too much. You are someone whose brain learned, in very specific circumstances, that staying alert and prepared was the safest way to move through the world. The loop is not a flaw, it is loyalty. Your brain has been trying to protect you every single time. It just never learned that it's allowed to rest. So the next time the loop starts at 2 a.m., mid-conversation, in the middle of something that should feel good, don't try to stop it, just notice it, name it, write it down if you can, and then say, quietly, to the part of you that is still scanning for threats that have already passed, I have this. You can let go now. The tabs can close. Not all at once, not permanently, but one at a time, in the moments when you remember that the machine is allowed to rest. The loop ends where the landing is Spoony and Friends, because everything you feel has an explanation.